We're so excited to have two speakers from A.T. Kearney, Sean Ryan and Vidur Bhandari. Sean is a partner with A.T. Kearney and leads the American strategy, marketing, and sales practice. He has over 18 years of global experience working with clients across a broad range of strategic issues. Sean was recognized by the Chicago Council on Global Affairs as one of Chicago's emerging leaders. He has an MBA from the University of Chicago and an MA from Johns Hopkins University. He is a frequent speaker and writer on the most relevant sales topics. Vidur is a principal at A.T. Kearney. He has broad experience working with consumer packaged goods, retail, and transportation clients on a variety of strategy, sales, and marketing topics. He focuses on helping clients improve their growth strategies, business unit strategies, marketing effectiveness, and efficiency. He is also a mentor to 4 consultants at the firm, coaching them through their career development. Previously, he worked on building a high-tech startup, Zimbu, helping grow the company from a 5-person team to an organization of more than 125 employees. He also serves on the Leadership Circle Board of the Executives Club of Chicago. Please join me and the InsideSales.com team to welcoming Sean and Vidur.
The work that we've been doing in B2C sales, it's something that we're all very familiar with, the transformation that's happened in terms of how we engage with products, learn about products, purchase products. It's something we experience every day. We're quite familiar with it. What we're seeing and what we want to talk to you about today is this issue around transformation that's taking place in B2B sales, and the rate at which that's happening is actually occurring at a pace that's far greater than what we normally would expect. It's a kind of hindsight bias that we have. At the future, we're going to look back and we're going to say, wow, look at what happened. In fact, it's happening right now in our very midst. We want to talk with you a little bit about what our observations are as it relates to those changes that are occurring today.
That's right, Sean. There's a lot of changes happening, right? There's changes happening on multiple dimensions. But for most people here today, probably 3 things to keep in mind. 1, the B2B transformation is going to be very B2C-ish, right? Your customers are going to expect anytime, anywhere access to products, experiencing the products in a virtual way, an intuitive way, in an on-demand, real-time way, just like they're used to buying things in their personal lives. It's going to be an imperative for companies to have a digital capability in this space. So no longer is digital B2B selling an option, it is going to be the imperative. And finally, simplification is going to be the mantra, because it's so complex, the way products and services are sold today through the multiple channels, that customers are going to want to work with companies that make it easy for them to buy, and vice versa, it's easier for you to sell.
The insights that Vidur and I are going to share with you today come from 2 sources. One is the work that we've done, as well as the survey results, a global survey that we conducted with our colleagues in Asia Pacific, as well as in Europe and the Middle East. It comprises a survey of 1,600 individuals. Many of you hopefully are watching this video right now. It covers a broad set of industry sectors, segmented by revenue, so it's looking at smaller organizations, $10 to $100 million in revenue, segmented all the way up to large organizations, $10 billion and greater. It's looking at sales management at both the top as well as middle layers, and it's giving you some insight as to what some of the leading players are doing that we believe is differentiating them, creating some separation from those who are, let's say, watching and waiting. And we want to encourage all of you to take a look at these results. Perhaps it'll trigger some thoughts on the changes that you think might be necessary for your organization.
So Sean mentioned we have this broad survey, and there's a lot of great insight, but we can't share all of it here today. And we will be coming out with a series of articles, blog posts, to keep you informed on what we found. But we want to talk today about some of the most important findings that hopefully will help you think about your own transformations. And the first place to start is we really wanted to understand what top performers or top performing companies are doing that the rest of the pack aren't, right? And how are they thinking about the future of sales and what's going to matter? And what's interesting is that these companies outperform the average players by about 2 times sales growth and 2.5 times sales productivity. So just think about that and what you could learn from the way they think about the future. And 5 things are at the top of their minds. The first is simplification. So how do we, whether it's the offerings or our interactions with customers, how do we simplify all of that? And that's what top sales leaders are thinking about. The second are digital channels. And these aren't so much their own channels, but other digital channels that are emerging, non-traditional competitors that have surfaced. So Amazon Supply is a great example that everybody's worried about will disrupt the B2B space. The third is there will be no selling without digital, right? And Sean, you've experienced this.
I think it's probably worth mentioning that this is true not only in highly regulated or non-regulated, but also in highly regulated markets. Digital permeates everything. And I think one of the big questions that we see among our clients is one of, are existing brick and mortar organizations ready to make the transition, given the legacy of experience that they have in non-digital space? And so we see a lot of things happening around, let's say, acquisition or partnership with organizations that are built, their DNA is focused around digital, and that allows some of the leading performers to make those kind of leaps or those jump starts from where they have been traditionally.
The fourth is going to be big data or analytics, right? So again, something we've seen in the B2C space, rather, is very much top of mind for B2B sales leaders. How do we leverage all of this data we have on our customers to really get smart about selling? And we'll talk about a little bit later on some examples of how companies are analyzing data to pinpoint where the opportunities are and where they should invest resources. And finally, a lot of the players think that really only 2 sales models are going to exist. Either we're going to have strategic partnerships between the seller and their customers, or it's going to be a no-frills relationship. So really thinking about where you are on that spectrum and where you want to be to actually have value and create value in that relationship is going to be important.
Vidur just mentioned the 5 trends that are shaping the future of sales. I'd like to talk a little bit about 3 of the 9 emerging sales practices that we see leading companies deploying as they try and respond to these changes that we see in the B2B space particularly. The first one is this idea of anytime, anywhere sales, something that we've experienced in the B2C space. It's this idea that you're always on, 24/7, 365. The second is the increasing use of science or big data in order to engage in predictive analytics, to imagine what the future might look like and make better decisions about product choices, customers that you serve, et cetera. And then the third is this idea of selling, sales beyond selling, or moving from, in an explicit manner, transactional selling into strategic selling. I think we're all looking and thinking about doing that implicitly, but the importance of being much more explicit about that so that it's really felt and understood by your customers is increasingly important. And Vidur, you spent quite a bit of time working with and thinking about some examples in this space.
Yeah, and there's a lot of examples, and if you look inside your industries, you'll find examples of competitors and maybe yourselves that are deploying against these practices, right? But there's 3 to the points that Sean just made I'd like to talk about. So the first is Cisco. And Cisco has done a really nice job of this anytime, anywhere, B2C-ish type of selling, where they've integrated all their different channels that they have seamlessly onto one platform. So for a customer, again, it really doesn't matter how they interact and where they interact with Cisco, at what level in the customer organization they're interacting. That sale and that relationship is seamlessly managed. And if you think about it, that's really the omni-channel holy grail that companies are striving for in a B2C context. The other example is EMC Square, right? The big data storage company. And so being a data storage company, you'd expect they know a few things about data. So they've really started to leverage big data and the analytics around it to predict where the next sales growth is going to come from, right? And so they can be more effective and efficient in how they deploy their resources and where they make investments to go after new opportunities. And then finally, as we were talking about sales beyond selling, right? So creating those strategic relationships that are beyond the transactional of products and services is Syngenta. And Syngenta is a big agribusiness in Europe. They make seeds and they make fertilizers. And what they did was they integrated the full front end of their organization, of the seed business and the fertilizer business, and integrated the complete back end of the organization. So for customers now, they can truly create value in the solution that they're bringing them for their farms or productions or whatever.
And I think just to maybe close out some of that thinking, there was some very interesting data as we sifted through and looked at those survey results, several generalizations, many of which you'll see in the documentation, but three that I'll call out. When you look at what is it that creates separation between the organizations that are truly leading, the top 10%, those that are seeing productivity, sales productivity and sales growth that is at or around 2x what we see among the average. There's several things that pop out, three that I'll highlight. Number one, this idea of being digitally enabled. Of the organizations that were in the top decile, 75% of those organizations were digitally enabled versus the average, which is around 30%. The other point I would mention is collaboration, this idea of collaborating not only internally across business units, but also externally, upstream with suppliers and from a distributor standpoint, perhaps downstream with retailers. What we saw is that the leaders were focusing on collaboration in 80% of the cases, whereas among the, let's say, the average was more around 50%. And then finally, this idea around influencer marketing. So not only, let's say, creating a need or a desire, but creating this sense of a must-have within the marketplace. What we found is that the leaders here were at 60% focusing on this kind of capability, whereas the average performers were more around 25% in that range.
So there's one other thing that separates leaders from the rest of the pack, and that is how they think about transforming their sales organizations. If you think about transforming your organizations in a top-down driven approach, those types of changes tend to fail. What makes transformation successful is when you're inclusive of all levels of the sales organization, when you truly collaborate and co-create solutions all the way from top management down to the field force on the front lines. And that's when solutions take root. That's when you really get transformation that sustains and you get the impact and the results that you're looking for.
These are exactly the elements that distinguish the way in which A.T. Kearney works with its clients. This idea of truly being collaborative, as Vidur mentioned, this idea of engaging for results, because at the end of the day, it's the results that our clients feel like they own, which allow the transformation to truly take shape. We work across the spectrum from the strategic side all the way to the operational side of engaging and executing sales programs. And that work is built off of hundreds of engagements that we've been involved with over the last 20 to 30 years. The work that we've been doing on the survey is going to continue to be mined. We just recently finished that work. We're collaborating with our own colleagues in Europe and in Asia Pacific that I mentioned earlier. And we are going to be publishing articles. You're going to see blog posts and even more videos that will bring to life all the results from the work that has been underway and continues within our practice, not only here in the Americas, but in Europe and in the Asia Pacific region as well. We hope you found this interesting and informative, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Vidur. We're always interested in feedback and comments, and we look forward to hearing from many of you in the not too distant future.
Thank you.